Hi everybody, this is Tim with the University of Vinyl. I'm back today with a new video. Today I'm going to focus on a mastering engineer. This is going to be another in my series that I've been doing over the last few months. And I want to revisit the mastering lab. So the mastering lab was comprised of two brothers, Doug and Sherwood Sax. Unfortunately, Doug Sax passed away in 2015. But he is widely regarded as one of the giants of the entire mastering engineer realm. He and his brother started the mastering lab in Hollywood, California in 1967. They eventually moved their operation to Ojai, California. And Sherwood basically developed all of the equipment, all of the electronics, all tube-based electronics that they used in their entire mastering chain. They were renowned for their full sound, very nice, nuanced separation of instruments, clarity. All of the top artists during the 1970s at one point in time, maybe not all, but a great majority of them, found their way to the mastering lab as far as bringing their project for that final bit of creative consultation, ensuring that they had the very best sounding version of their project to bring out to the public. Now, I featured the mastering lab in an earlier video, and believe it or not, I made a mistake. I was talking about One Trick Pony, the fantastic album by Paul Simon, and got mixed up in my mastering engineers, and that was actually mastered at Sterling Sound by the great Ted Jensen. I did leave a note. I think I pinned a note in the comments on that video. So I felt, hey, I kind of shortchanged the mastering lab and all of the fantastic work they've done. And I thought, well, let's do another episode. And today I've got five heavy hitters. So stay tuned. First of all, let's talk about identifying a pressing that has been mastered at the mastering lab. It's really quite easy. You're always going to see the initials TML for the mastering lab, and then there's going to be a dash for M, S, or X. M stands for master, S stands for slave, or second copy, or second lathe. And X is an unidentified lathe that they had used. So, just to let you know the stature of Doug Sax in the mastering community, when he passed away, Chad Kassem and Analog Productions put together a deal to purchase all of the mastering lab's legendary equipment, and they transferred it to the Analog Productions facilities in Salina, Kansas. That happened after Doug Sax's death, of course, in 2015. In 1971, there was a quirky American singer who had gained quite a bit of notoriety because John Lennon of the Beatles had actually name-dropped him as being his favorite singer. Of course, I'm talking about Harry Nilsson, and this is a 71 album, Nilsson Schmielsen. Now, Mobile Fidelity came out with their own reissue of this title in the spring of this year. And, you know, at first of all, I wasn't successful in getting a copy. And I was at first a little bit bummed, but, you know, I went back and revisited this pressing that I have, which is an early, I think this is a second press. The way that you can tell that is the title, Nilsson Schmielsen, is actually in a little bit of a larger font, a little more prominent on that cover. And then also on the back cover, the bottom left corner, you can see an RE there for reissue or repress. But I do know, at looking at all the Dead Wax matrix information, that this is, I believe it was a late 1971, maybe into 1972 repressing. The important thing is it's got the TML in the Dead Wax, and this sounds very, very, very good. And this is very reasonably priced and fairly easy to find out there today. Let's talk about just a few of the iconic sounds that are on this album. We've got Gotta Get Up on that open side one. Early in the Morning is a fantastic song. I particularly like the Moonbeam song as well. And on side two, of course, it opens up with Without You. This is, you know, an incredible song, and this is the penultimate version of the song. It's, you know, I think the guys from Badfinger originally wrote Without You, but Harry basically took control of this thing, and it just soars to incredible heights. It sounds amazing on this pressing. I am very pleased that I have this in my collection. I also love Coconut, Let the Good Times Roll, and then, of course, Jump Into the Fire. Jump Into the Fire jumps out of my speakers on my system. Horrible segue. But it just, you know, some of the players on this album as well. We've got Jim Gordon on drums and percussion. Klaus Voormann. We've heard a lot about Klaus Voormann lately because he's all over All Things Must Pass, the George Harrison epic title. This was recorded in London at Trident Studios, produced by Richard Perry. Richard Perry is the prototypical singer-songwriter producer known for his lush productions. A little bit more on Jump Into the Fire on side two. It's got that tribal drum passage by the great Jim Gordon. And when you actually do a needle drop on that song, I love there's a very nice acoustic guitar that is crystal clear and coming from the right channel. Very important thing with this album, and I know I repeat myself sometimes in these videos, but it's important to find a very clean and quiet pressing for the best overall satisfaction level as far as you're concerned. So try and find a clean one if you're out there digging. But hey, if you couldn't get the MoFi like myself, don't cry. This sounds fantastic, even a repress, but make sure it's got TML in the Dead Wax. That is Nielsen Schmielsen, the 1971 release by Harry Nielsen. In 1974, Art Garfunkel, having left Paul Simon, although I think I think it was a mutual parting of the ways after Bridge Over Troubled Water in 1970. Art Garfunkel went on to work on a couple movie projects. Everybody knows what Paul Simon did. He came out with some fantastic solo albums, incredible run in the early 70s. Art Garfunkel wanted to return with another album, and his old buddy Paul kind of came to his aid a little bit. So Paul Simon had written a song and thought, you know, this would be a good Art Garfunkel song. And, you know, I'm going to give him a call. I think he should record this. Long story short, the song is the centerpiece of this album, Breakaway, the 1975 Art Garfunkel solo album. And the song I'm talking about is My Little Town. And what happened is, in their conversations, they decided, not sure exactly how it all worked out, but what we have on this album is a Simon and Garfunkel reunion, and that song is the incredible My Little Town. The song was actually recorded and features all of the Muscle Shoals players on it. It was recorded at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, you know, the legendary place where Aretha came down and originally laid down a couple songs, and basically fell in love with the sound and the players, enough so that she actually flew all the players up to New York to help finish some of those songs and those early albums that she put out. In addition to My Little Town, there is a lot to love on this album. First of all, it sounds incredible. The first song on side one is a fantastic Stevie Wonder cover. I believe when I fall in love, it will be forever. I forgot the second phrase. I forgot the second half of that song title. But yeah, I believe when I fall in love, it will be forever. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Art Garfunkel. Is there anyone else out there with a better voice? Put it in the comments if you have arguments or if you have other ideas. But to my mind, Art Garfunkel is in the top three as far as vocal talent and just a unique timbre in his voice. Just incredible and beautiful. So in addition to the famous Muscle Shoals players, this album also features another very, very famous set of session players, and those guys were known as the Wrecking Crew. They're LA-based studio musicians who were just the ungodly presence on so many hit albums of the 1970s by James Taylor, Linda Ronstadt, Carla Bonhoeff, and others. But, you know, back to I Believe When I Fall in Love, It Will Be Forever. I don't know why I have a hard time remembering that title. You have a gorgeous double-tracked vocal by Garfunkel on this song. Larry Knechtel is the piano player. Larry, of course, was the piano player on those gorgeous passages on Bridge Over Troubled Water, the song. We have Russ Kunkel on drums and the fantastic Leland Sklar on bass. Leland, I don't know if he was considered for the vacancy in ZZ Top, but believe me, he would fit right in with that incredible beard that he has. But back to this album. In addition to I Believe When I Fall in Love, It Will Be Forever, there are some other outstanding songs. I Only Have Eyes for You is another standout. That is actually on side 2, second song on side 2. This song features Andrew Gold, another fantastic session player. He was all over several Linda Ronstadt albums before he went on to a kind of a mixed solo career. But he does all the electric guitars on I Only Have Eyes for You. Very, very tasteful electric guitar as well. Background vocals is provided by the great Stephen Bishop. Finally, the title track is another fantastic song. This has got a very breezy, jazzy feel to it. Very, very smooth, easy listening song. Jim Keltner is on drums, and he has Graham Nash, David Crosby, Bruce Johnston from the Beach Boys, and Tony Tennille on background vocals. If you have not heard this album lately or you're not familiar with it, it's out there in used bins for $3 typically. Make sure you get a copy that's got TML in the dead wax for the mastering lab. And this is just a fantastic album. I actually love that front cover. Tragically, this has actually got Garfunkel's, one of his old girlfriends who actually died. I think it was a drug overdose. So anyway, but definitely an album to seek out if you haven't heard it. It sounds amazing. At the end of the 1980s, Neil Young had gotten out of his contract with David Geffen and put out an album, kind of a blues and R&B based album with a pickup band that he called the Blue Notes. And that album was, what the fuck was that album? That album was This Note's for You. It came out in 1988. But what I wanted to talk about today is the 1989 album, and that was Freedom. And Freedom was back on the Warner Reprise label. That's not the famous Reprise, you know, the orange steamship label, but kind of a tricolored thing that they had at that point in time. The important thing about this album is, much to the chagrin of David Geffen, Neil Young has said in interviews that, you know, after almost 10 years of experimentation, you know, we had those albums, the kind of middle of the road Life album, Landing on Water, Trans, Old Ways. All of those albums have got a couple standout tracks on them. But in 1989, Neil Young has said in interviews, I just wanted to put out a Neil Young album. I hadn't done it in a while. And what we got was Freedom. And Freedom was a tremendous return to form for Neil Young. Totally revitalized his career and basically began a whole new chapter in Neil Young's incredibly long, successful career. Now, Doug Sax is actually referenced in the liner notes to this album, as well as the mastering lab, and you can find TML etched in the dead wax as well. I think this album is due, you know, Neil Young announced an incredible backlog of albums that are going to be reissued coming soon. I think Freedom is due to be reissued sometime in 2022. So until that time, if you can't wait, this sounds incredible. And you know, let's talk about the makeup of this album. The most famous song on here is "Keep on Rockin' in the Free World," but just like Rust Never Sleeps, the 1979 album, so 10 years prior, he bookended the album with an acoustic version of the song and an electric version, last song on side 2. Of course, on Rust Never Sleeps, it was Hey, Hey, My, Rock and Roll Will Never Die. And the acoustic version, first song on side 1, Rockin' in the Free World, was a solo acoustic performance by Young that was actually recorded at Jones Beach, out on Long Island. And the electric version is just an over-the-top, everybody knows that song, I would think, at this point in time. If you want to see a fantastic version of Rockin' in the Free World, go on YouTube and search for Saturday Night Live rehearsals, Rockin' in the Free World. This thing surfaced last year on YouTube, and it's absolutely incredible. Interesting sidebar, Steve Jordan is on drums during that SNL performance. Of course, Steve Jordan, if you haven't heard, is going to be sitting in for Charlie Watts on the upcoming Rolling Stones fall tour. So for the first time in almost 10 years, I think the argument can be made that Neil Young was totally engaged in this album and in the concept and in the songs. The songs and the songwriting definitely shine through. There are multiple fantastic songs on this album. Crime in the City is an epic story song, very atmospheric. The song Don't Cry features some signature Neil Old Black electric feedback and some incredible drumming by Chad Cromwell. So Chad Cromwell, famous session drummer, he has been featured on several Neil albums, and he is on, I believe, every track on this album. There's a beautiful song called Too Far Gone as well on Freedom, and this thing harkens back to it could have been lifted from Comes a Time. It's a very spare acoustic electric song that's got one of those signature Neil Young kind of tossed off shaggy guitar solos that he is famous for. But this is 1989's Freedom. It's on the Reprise label. It's got TML and the Dead Wax. And until that reissue comes out, I'm not even sure if I'm going to need to get the reissue because this thing sounds freaking amazing. In 1987, the New York-based band 10,000 Maniacs came out with their second album called In My Tribe. And In My Tribe was produced by Peter Asher. They had kind of made a splash with their initial album. The standout person, of course, is Natalie Merchant with her gorgeous voice and kind of a very interesting stage presence as well. She was known for her kind of dervaling and twisting and dancing on stage, always barefoot, kind of almost like kind of a neo hippie. You can go watch some of the earlier appearances that she made with 10,000 Maniacs in solo on Letterman, and it's obvious that Dave Letterman had a huge crush on Natalie Merchant. But this album, my favorite song is Like the Weather. It's got a fantastic opening guitar part by their lead guitar player, Robert Buck, no relation to Peter Buck. And actually, Robert Buck died way too soon. I think he developed some kind of a liver disease or cancer or something. Believe he died in the mid-1990s. At that point in time, Natalie Merchant had left the band and started her solo career. This has also got What's the Matter Here and Hey Jack Kerouac, and famously, it has a cover of Cat Stevens' Peace Train that is on side 2, and Cat Stevens had come out in favor of the fatwa that had been put against author Salman Rushdie, and Natalie Merchant and the band kind of heard about that and quickly moved to have the Peace Train song dropped from future pressings. I think it was eventually added back to, they've got a greatest hits comp that Peace Train is back on. Despite all that, it's a great version. Anyway, so this is the second album by 10,000 Maniacs. Look for TML in the Dead Wax. Mastered by Doug Sax. Sounds incredible. Great, great band. In June of 1982, Pete Townsend put out his second, well, actually, no, I think this was actually his third solo album at that point in time. All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes. And it wasn't really well received, but in the summer of that year, if you go back and read interviews and check out old videos, it seems like Pete Townshend had decided that it was time to close down the enterprise known as The Who. And they had been working on another album for The Who. Pete had worked up new songs and had worked on some other songs that were leftovers. Of course, this was the second album that would feature Kenny Jones on drums after Keith Moon had died. But plans were afoot to do a farewell tour. This is 1982, remember. How many more tours has The Who had since then? But anyway, plans were put together. They were going to release what some had thought would be the final Who studio album, and it was for a very, very long time. The album I'm talking about is It's Hard, released in October of 1982. There's the band, kind of a period correct photo around a video game. Shitty concept as far as I'm concerned. The back cover's even worse. It's got the kid and then the band as kind of video game characters per se. Despite that, and despite Pete's wishes to kind of, put a nail in the coffin as this enterprise known as The Who, in my opinion, this is a very, very, very strong Who album, mastered by Doug Sax. It sounds incredible. There were rumors back in the classic record days that they were going to put out a copy of this. They never did. There's been a reissue and a remix on CD, but to me, this still sounds like the best pressing that you can find, the best version that you can find. I'm sure that's my opinion. I'm sure there will be people out there who would say, no, you need to go find, the 1997 CD, etc., etc. I think there's been a 180-gram version of the album that came out 2012, 2015, something like that. I don't have it. I do have a couple copies of this. Now, in my opinion, the best version of this album is that QX2. This is the super version compound with the translucency. And this was actually put out. You can kind of see that sticker loaned as a promo copy. Apparently these never made the retail shelves, the QX versions. A lot of these QX versions did make it out in retail in the early to mid to late 1980s. I've got a video on all of these QX copies from the 1980s. You can go check it out. I go through a lot of different titles that sound fantastic. So whenever you see that QX2, snap it up if you see these. But yeah, this is the Mastering Lab and Doug Sax. And let's talk about a few of the songs on this album and why I'm making this argument that I feel it's such a strong album. There are plenty of critics out there saying that this is a substandard Who album. Half of the songs should have been Pete Townshend solo songs. I agree, there's one or two that I'm wondering, well, why, during that same calendar year, the song I'm thinking about is One Life's Enough for Me. Very, very emotional, delicate song that Daltrey is singing. Seems like it would have been coming better from Townshend, and it would have fit right in on All the Best Cowboys, in my opinion. There's another emotional sounding song, A Man is a Man. Beautiful song. It sounds like it could have been a leftover from The Who by Numbers. Another fantastic introspective album. Pete was in a certain frame of mind for that album, kind of questioning the whole enterprise of The Who and how long it could go on and whether it was worth it or not. The Who by Numbers is fantastic, but we're talking about, what am I doing? We're talking about It's Hard. Anyway, A Man is a Man is a beautiful song. I'm happy it's on this album. It sounds fantastic. Now, the two standouts, there are three standout tracks in my opinion. First of all, Cry If You Want. If you put on Cry If You Want and wait for the last minute of that song, you're going to hear some of the most incredible slash and burn power chord guitar playing that Pete Townsend has ever put down to, whether it's tape or digital or whatever format. Cry If You Want. Put that on, and the entire song is fantastic. It's got a perfect Kenny Jones, kind of a militaristic drum beat, very, very much in the pocket. That's another thing. I'm going to jump off on a tangent, but these songs that Townsend composed and wrote for this album, Keith Moon would not have been able to do justice to most of these songs. They required a precision and an in-the-pocket drummer that Kenny Jones is or was. So there have been deriders of Kenny Jones, but my God, look at the situation that Kenny Jones was thrown into on this album. Totally impossible situation. John Entwistle's got 3 songs on this album as well, which is interesting. The one that I like the most, I do like Dangerous, which is on side 1, but I like One at a Time. Because it's a great kind of full band performance. You've got Roger and Pete on co-lead vocals on the first verse before Entwistle takes over. And Entwistle, was a lead bass guitar player. His stuff is just amazing to hear on this album. And this thing has got a ton of punch and a big sound stage, plenty of bass. The only drawback there is a little sibilance on some of these cymbal fills and crashes here and there on a couple songs, but I am very, very pleased with this pressing. Now, we also have to talk about 2 more songs. Athena, lead song, lead single, side 1. It was written, Pete Townsend fell in love with the actress Teresa Russell, was rebuffed. It didn't go anywhere, and he ended up writing this song, Athena, about this whole situation. And then, of course, last song on side 1, this is another epic Who song. Pete Townsend has come up with another synth-heavy song in the same vein of Who Are You, Baba O'Reilly, and Can't Get Fooled Again, Won't Get Fooled Again. That is Eminence Front. And what I love of late in live versions, he really goes crazy with some guitar fill and just kind of extra guitar soloing throughout that song if you go check it out live. But it's got a very, very cool slow burn, slow build to that song with that very cool synthesizer pattern in the background. That's Eminence Front. That's it. This is It's Hard. I've got that Quiet version, but I also have just your bog standard pressing. Look for TML and the Dead Wax. Give this another appraisal. I don't think that this is a horrible Who album by any means. It's got a lot of redeeming qualities. It's Hard, 1982, The Who. There you go. There's 5 more albums today that I covered that were mastered at the Mastering Lab by the legendary Doug Sax. Doug, of course, with his brother Sherwood, started a Mastering Lab. They were one of the first, along with Sterling Sound in New York, one of the first boutique mastering labs that gave artists another avenue as far as bringing their project to fruition, having another set of critical ears on their project, having a little more creativity as far as taking that final mix, maybe tweaking some things, and bringing that thing in its best possible state to go to market. The Mastering Lab and Doug Sax, thanks again for watching today. I will come back soon with a new video, and I hope everyone enjoys your weekend.